We're live.
Yes, we are live. Welcome, everyone, to the TechForge podcast. I, once again, am your host, Dynamo Ned, for this 19th episode of TechForge. And I'm, once again, by my faithful co-hosts, Jason and Hunter.
Yo.
Okay.
All right, got some good stuff for the show this evening. We're going to be discussing Intel's Core i9-9900K again, because the independent reviews are finally out, and they tell a slightly different story than Intel's benchmarks would like you to believe. In addition, we have Intel potentially canceling their 10-nanometer process, though they say, nuh-uh. AMD's Vega 20 engineering samples are popping up in benchmark databases. And NVIDIA sneaks out a new version of the GTX 1060 because we needed another one.
Yep.
But first, let's start with AMD. Our first article for the evening is from Tom's Hardware. It is that AMD's stock drops 24% after low revenue and guidance and the crypto crash. Unfortunately, AMD's third quarter earnings weren't quite as promising as expected, even though their sales of CPUs have been up massively over the same quarter last year. Unfortunately, their graphics not so much, due to the cryptocurrency crash. And so, the massive downturn in GPU sales has left AMD overstocked for inventory, and as such, it caused a sell-off in aftermarket trading earlier this week, leading to a 24% decline in the stock price.
24% sounds like a lot, and I'm sure it is from a stock value standpoint, but honestly, it's really nothing to worry about. They've had a great year. They've been pretty much able to deliver from the CPU perspective. I don't blame them for video cards, even though, the Vega release was kind of viewed as kind of an issue, because they were perceived as not performing as well, not available at MSRP, and kind of power hungry. But then no cards were available, and that was not their fault. That was just the market and what occurred. So with 2019 coming up and everyone kind of expecting a big year from them, I don't think it's really anything to worry about. It's more of a short-term thing, really, than long-term, I think. So
I would tend to agree. One of the slides that AMD shared with investors at their third quarter earnings call was a revenue trend showing the last 7 quarters of revenue, starting with Q1 of 2017. Q1 of 2017, they showed $1.178 billion in revenue. And in Q3 of this year, they showed $1.653 billion in revenue. And according to this slide, that is plus 4% year over year, meaning they were 4% higher than this time last year. But that's not that huge jump compared to the previous 2 quarters this year, which were much, much higher.
Well, Bitcoin.
And well, part of that is due to the fact that, the difference between Q1 2017 and Q1 2018 is a difference of almost $500 million.
Well, it's just not insignificant, but again, completely different market now. So,
and the difference between Q2 2017 and Q2 2018 was over $600 million. So when the difference between Q3 and Q3 2017 and Q3 2018 is only about 40 million, or excuse me, about $60 million, it does look not quite as impressive. But again, it's your point of reference. In Q3 of 2017 is when the Ryzen boom really started to take off after the introduction of Threadripper and the Ryzen 7 showing itself to be competitive with Intel's 8th gen series.
And you could actually say it's competitive with the 9th gen.
In a lot of ways it is. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but...
Yeah, it's nothing to worry about. I mean, as long as they're still showing a profit, which I'm sure they are, they're competitive, they've got stock, the pricing is good. All graphics cards are overstocked right now. Pascal, Vega, except for Turing. Those are all sold out.
And AMD, Lisa Su apparently also told the company that they had already sold $20 million worth of their 7 nanometer EPYC 2 CPUs to the data center.
Really?
Mostly as sampling for when they go, quote, for revenue in 2019. So these are probably mostly testing samples. But the fact that they're already sampling out processors that they feel confident enough to send out to data centers for comparative purposes means that the process is moving along smoothly.
Well, that's a good sign. It's a really good sign.
And of course, 7 nanometer EPYC, 7 nanometer Ryzen with the Zen Plus or Zen 2 architecture, excuse me, and the new Vega 7 nanometer GPUs are also supposed to be out in Q1 or early Q2 of 2019. So AMD also announced they made $68 million in IP income by licensing their x86 processor design to Chinese company Diana.
Which that ought to be a nice...
Or excuse me, the Chinese company is Hygun, and they're producing Diana.
They're making consoles, aren't
processors.
Aren't they making consoles, though, around that?
They're mostly designed as SoCs, but there are also some enterprise applications.
Ah, okay, gotcha. That ought to be a nice revenue stream for them.
It definitely should be. And given the fact that Intel is still grappling with production shortages, in fact, so much so that they had to move back their H310 chipset to the 22 nanometer process so they could ramp more 14 nanometer for their 9th gen processors, we could definitely see AMD have a market where it could pick up Intel's slack.
Well, they kind of have to. I mean, you can't find a 9th gen processor online in stock. Not as far as I'm aware.
I mean,
go ahead.
I was looking for a different project. I was looking at the ASRock Deskman 310, which is a little one of those 5-inch by 5-inch super small form factor PCs that's based on around the H310 chipset. And it can handle up to 65 watt 8th generation and 9th generation Intel processors. So I got to thinking, well, I wonder if a Core i5-8400 would fit in there. Yeah, until I started looking at Core i5-8400 prices. Remember, this is a chip that's supposed to retail for about $180. Do you want to know what they're currently going for on Newegg?
No idea.
$339.
Sure.
And if you want to do any of the unlocked overclockable variants, it's even higher.
How much?
Core i5-8400. When I looked at Newegg earlier, it was going for about 300.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
But
that's Ryzen 2700X, man.
no, apparently. So
339.
okay, it was 339. Okay, sorry, that was from a third-party seller. It's currently 219 from Newegg themselves.
Okay, gotcha.
But still, this is for a processor whose retail price is supposed to be about $180.
Well, for 219, you can get an you can get a 2600X. Which do I buy? Maybe at the 12 thread.
Yeah, it's the prices for some of the Intel processors are truly getting ridiculous.
So I'm on Newegg right now. I'm just going to filter by i7 and i5. I don't want the X series. Don't want the Extreme. Love these silly generations. 7th, 8th, 9th. No, I'll just go 8th and 9th.
And even on Amazon, the Core i5-8400 is going for about $199.
It's not horrible, but it's still over MSRP.
Correction, apparently there's been a minor price uptick since I checked earlier this morning. It is now up to $204.99, and it's not in stock until November 2nd.
Oh.
And that's for an 8400. That's a solidly mid-range part.
Yeah. That's exactly mid-range part. Like middle of the pack mid-range.
Whereas I could go get a Ryzen 5 2600 for $160.
Yeah. Or 1600 for 140, 150.
Yep.
So yeah, the 8400 with a decent cooler might game slightly faster, but I doubt you see the difference. Actually, I would say that a 2600 or 2600X would outperform it in gaming slightly.
Particularly for heavily multi-threaded games.
Yeah. Well, the 2600X is known to reach single and dual core clock speeds of 4.3 or 4.4 gigahertz.
With the right cooler, sure.
Yeah. I've seen that on this thing. Of course, I got a 240 mil AIO on it, but.
Speaking of AMD's Vega and their future on 7 nanometer, there was, this literally came up today. This is from WCCF Tech, and they got it from Video Card Z. So take it with a grain of salt, but apparently AMD's Vega 20 GPU in one of its early engineering sample forms appeared in the Final Fantasy 15 benchmark database. And apparently Vega 20 is showing comparable performance to the 1080 and slightly higher than the 1070 Ti at 4K high.
Yeah, it's slightly between a 1070 Ti and a 1080, I think, right?
Yep. Specifically, and again, I want to stress the Final Fantasy 15 benchmark is, well, Gamers Nexus did an excellent video a while back on why it is potentially a problem, because it doesn't, apparently it makes extensive use of NVIDIA's GameWorks and HairWorks features, and it doesn't do proper object culling in the distance, so it renders stuff that's on the other side of the map even when you're not looking at it.
So considering it's considering it's optimized more for NVIDIA cards, and the fact that this is an engineering sample, and the fact that this is a professional based card and not for gaming, I'd say this isn't necessarily a bad showing, honestly.
Yeah, because early engineering samples, they tend to be clocked low.
Mhm.
They tend to be geared more for stability than performance, because they're still tweaking things to make sure everything's working correctly.
Well, not only that, but the driver is more optimized for compute.
That too.
So I think if you had a Vega 27 nanometer end product for consumer use, uh, you, I think you would definitely see slightly higher numbers, at least 10 or 15% higher, maybe, not better. So that would put it pretty much between the RTX 2070 and the RTX 2080, theoretically.
Yeah, I could see that. I think probably with a bit of work, and if they get the clock speeds up and keep the power under control, you could definitely see it being the 2070. Of course, again, referring to Gamers Nexus, they did that absolutely insane video not too long ago where they took an RX Vega 56, did a power mod on it where it could accept up to 242% more power.
Yeah.
And with some tweaks and overclocks, it beat the RTX 2070. It's just that it consumes 640 watts doing it.
Yeah, and like they said in the header, or the title of the video, unlimited power.
You know,
So yeah,
insert Palpatine meme here. Unlimited power. Not recommended.
no, no. That's when your GPU VRMs say, "Screw you, I'm going home." Then they pop off the card and they walk somewhere else.
Because you've
Snap
given them
crackle
enough
pop.
juice to do it.
Yep. I didn't know Snap Crackle Pop also was on graphics cards. It's pretty good, pretty fantastic. I gotta go buy a new graphics card now.
And speaking of graphics card, AMD's not the only one with graphics cards nudes. Apparently, NVIDIA decided that they were going to preempt AMD's planned RX 590 with a fifth variant of the GeForce GTX 1060 because apparently it was necessary.
The same thing they did with the 1070 Ti and Vega 56. I don't know. I guess at this point, I'm almost expecting them to release like if AMD comes out with, Polaris 30 finally, I'm almost expecting them to come out with like an HBM2 variant of the 1060. Like here's some memory that's right off the TPU die. Here you go.
Yeah. So this new variant of the GeForce GTX 1060 still features 6 GB of GDDR5, but it is the higher clocked GDDR5X variant.
Yeah.
Which, for a reminder, now that means that now there are 5 different cards that are all named GTX 1060. The GTX 1060 3 gig, the GTX 1060 6 gig, the GTX 1060 5 gig, which is only available in China, the GTX 6 gig, 9 gigabits per second, which features higher clocked GDDR5 at 9 gigabits per second, and now the GDDR5X variant, which is marked on the box at 8 gigabits per second, but apparently is capable of running up to 10 gigabits per second.
Mm. 6 versions, man.
Yeah. So, and which GTX 1060 you receive when you are buying your particular one, the only way you know is if it says 3 gig or 6 gig. But
then they've got 3 versions of the 6 gig out. So
right, and depending on when yours was manufactured, you could be getting 8 gigabits per second GDDR5, 9 gigabits per second GDDR5, or 10 gigabits per second GDDR5X. And they will all three perform similarly, but with just enough variance that they are separable.
it's a good card. I just don't know why they feel they have to keep releasing different variants of it.
According to Tech Radar, they're estimating that it will be roughly a 10% increase in performance over the traditional GDDR5 model,
Okay.
which
Which
would put it right in line with the estimated performance of the RX 590.
which you can get the same or similar performance upgrade just by tuning your card.
Exactly.
So if you have an 8 gigabit per second variant, so I've got one and I've been able to clock it up to 2 gigahertz just fine. And I haven't really messed with the memory, but I didn't really see any difference in performance, honestly, at least with the eyeball test. I don't know about benchmarks, but I don't know. Kind of meh, honestly.
Yeah, it does seem like Nvidia of late. It does really seem like they are being more reactive than proactive. Of course, maybe they think they just have such a large lead at this point that they don't have to be proactive.
Well, yes and no. Uh, from a perception standpoint, Pascal was great. Maxwell was really good outside of the 970 debacle, um, which did get handled. But Pascal was great. And then they messed all that momentum up with Turing. So, from a perception standpoint, I don't know, man. Yeah, they still have the overwhelming majority of the market share because of Pascal and Maxwell, but uh, I don't know, man. Um, RTX is just not winning lots of people over.
Well, and I think the price is largely to blame for that.
Oh,
But,
it's yeah, I completely agree. It's everything to blame for that. Features that
if
aren't available outside in the software realm, it's the pricing that's the big problem.
yeah, if we were seeing RTX 2070s at GTX 1070 prices, oh, I guarantee you the card would be selling even more than it is.
Oh yeah, and they'd have overwhelming support from the tech community too. But I think part of the problem is the fact that they're still selling Haskell. That's part of the problem and part of the challenge. And maybe pricing is the only way they differentiate right now. So, yeah, it's not been handled well, I think, by NVIDIA. Having nearly 20 SKUs out there, that's just
And adding another one with the new GTX 1060.
right. Because you can still get all the versions of these cards except for maybe the 5 gig model. Which, if
Right.
you really hunted for, you could probably find a variant out there somewhere. But
Yes, you can buy it off AliExpress.
AliExpress.
I checked.
Okay.
Hey, don't knock it. You can buy $60 GTX 750 Ti's, which are great for budget builds, off AliExpress every day of the week.
What kind?
GT $60 for a GTX 750 Ti.
Oh, really?
Yep.
You know, that might not be a bad idea for a Fortnite build if you want to flip an old Dell. It's got like a Sandy Bridge i5 or i7 in it.
Oh yeah, it's.
Hmm, interesting.
I mean, if you're willing to wait for slow boat to China shipping, because that's literally what it is,
Yeah.
it doesn't cost you anything, but it'll take you 30 days for it to get here.
Oh, you're probably better off getting a 660 Ti or something.
If it was closer and more local, perhaps.
Uh, Tough
Oh,
topic. Sorry.
no, it's all right. Anyway, we don't cover mobile much on here, but I thought this was important because, well, we talk a lot about the anti-consumer practices of Apple on here, particularly when it relates to the MacBook or the Mac Pro. But when other companies start acting like Apple, particularly ones that have differentiated themselves by not acting like Apple, it's a problem.
Yep.
And that's exactly what Google has done with the Pixel 3. This one's from Ars Technica, but you can find it all over the place. Apparently, Google has decided to introduce DRM for chargers, specifically wireless chargers for the Pixel 3.
Not a good idea.
Now, the key wireless charging standard is an industry standard, which apparently wasn't good enough for Google. As the Google Pixel 3 on third-party chargers will only charge at a very pokey 5 watts. Whereas to get the full 10 watts of wireless charging, you have to pay for the Pixel stand, which is outrageously priced at $79. That's after you've shelled out $800 to $1,000 for your Pixel 3.
That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous.
So the original, this originally came out when Android Police, or a reader of Android Police, reported to them that they had purchased a standard Anker key wireless charger for their Pixel 3 and noticed how slowly it was charging. And so they contacted Anker, and Anker told them that this was something that was commonly reported with the Google Pixel. That apparently there is a hardware limit in the Pixel 3 for third-party charging accessories. And Android Police took this to Google, and Google said that this was on purpose. Because apparently what Google PR told them was the Pixel 3 would charge at 10 watts on the Pixel stand, and that was due to a secure handshake being established that third-party chargers could not replicate and would indeed be limited to 5 watts. So far, Google's response is that the Pixel 3 does not support 10-watt key charging. It does support 10-watt wireless charging, and it does support the key wireless charging standard, but only at the 5-watt limit for the key. The 10-watt charging wirelessly must be done with Google's 10-watt proprietary wireless charging technology.
Yep. So they can make money off of a license or some sort of their own accessory stack. That's what that is.
Basically, Google says it is certifying chargers for the Pixel 3 via their Made for Google program. and pointed to a Belkin charger called the Boost Up Wireless Charging Pad 10 watt for Pixel 3 and Pixel 3 XL.
That's ridiculous. Key is a standard. Key is a standard. That's like saying, okay, well, uh, I've got an Intel GPU that if it's not on an Intel PCIe bracket, it's not going to be PCI Express 3. It's going to be 2 instead.
Or we're
Or
going
if
to skip PCI altogether, and we're going to use a different motherboard standard.
right. That's ridiculous. Key is a standard. And for someone to have a key wireless charger, for it to be called a key, it has to follow the key standard. Otherwise, it's just a wireless charger. They can't list it as a key charger. Key is a standard. I don't know why it's not good enough. It having a standard means that there's definitions in place. So as long as they design their hardware around those standards, I don't know why beyond creating another revenue stream why they would do that. I don't know if because I think ours asked why Google did that, and they're still waiting for a response. So,
well, their response was that if you want 10 watt, you have to use Google's 10 watt proprietary charging technology.
mm-hmm.
And apparently, the cheapest model is the Belkin model that I mentioned, and it's still going for $59.99.
Which, if you get a standard key wireless charger, what does that cost? Like $20?
Yeah, about 25.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd been looking at the Pixel 3 as a potential upgrade, but after that, no, thank you. I will stick with my Moto G series, or if I'm feeling like indulging myself, I might start looking at the OnePlus 6T.
Which you can't go wrong with the OnePlus. They're usually pretty good. I think they've probably gone up in price over the last few generations, but they still save a bundle.
Yep. Most likely, if I do upgrade, it's probably going to be to Motorola's G6 Plus, but because I'm using the G5 Plus now, and it's been very solid for me.
Nice. You know, I don't like when we see changes in design philosophy like this.
Yeah, that's the thing that really disturbs me about this is Google is moving the direction of Apple. And it was bad enough having one Apple. To have two is going to make it even worse.
You know, and coming back to non-Apple, my parents bought a Dell Inspiron 15 over the last year, and they unfortunately became victims of a problem that line has, where the power port, or I guess it's called a power pack or whatever, the port on the laptop that accepts the AC adapter basically is going out or went out. Um, you know how easy it is to replace that part? It connects to the motherboard via, a connection, but the actual port itself is mounted to the case of the laptop. So yeah, there's some work to tear it down, but you don't have to take the motherboard out. Like, the part itself is between $5 and $10, and you just take the old one out and put the new one back in, and boom, you're done. Close it up. I can't imagine what that would be like to replace on an iMac. I want to say it's probably soldered in. So
I had a similar problem a few years ago with a laptop my aunt had. It was a Toshiba that she had dropped while she was using it while the power jack was plugged in, and it shoved the power port. It sheared off the plastic casing was in and shoved it into the laptop.
Ooh.
And so, because apparently Toshiba decided it was a good idea to have their charger connect by cable to the motherboard, but then actually mount the charging port to the plastic of the laptop, which this was a cheap, low-end laptop. And so I told her I could probably fix it, but she said it wouldn't be worth it to fix it. And so she basically gave it to me. And I've since fixed it. And while it's a truly ancient machine, it's running like an old Core 2 Duo era processor. I think it's a Pentium T4400.
Okay. That's at least 13 years old.
Yeah, it's a dual core from about 2009.
Okay.
And
so 9.
And with 2 gigs of DDR2 RAM and GMA 4500 graphics. So basically, you know, it's an internet browsing machine at this point. But, you know, I was able to salvage it, and the actual part itself was about it came out to about $8 for the part and a couple minutes worth of replacing the cable and finding a new way to mount the power port in there. Which, the way the plastic was sheared off, originally I was just going to kind of Gorilla Glue it in there because, you know, it's plastic, but the way the plastic sheared, there wasn't enough surface to do that, so I wound up having to use a little piece of metal to reinforce it. Not the best looking, but it worked.
Yeah, I mean, that's the important part. As long as it's working fine.
Actually, yeah, here it is right here. I haven't had it out in a while, but yeah. This is the laptop right here. It's nice. Toshiba. And there was the power jack right there.
Nice. You really can't tell.
Yeah, if you opened it up and took a look on the inside, you could. But
gotcha. Not a bad looking laptop.
Not for what it does. You know, 15-inch, 720p, or sorry, 1366 by 768 screen.
Nice.
I could probably get another 2 gig stick of cheap DDR2 to throw in there. Bring it up to 4. It makes a nice little Linux browsing streaming machine.
Nice.
All right. I guess Hunter's having some problems with his setup because he's been muted the entire time.
He just wants us to see the Templar pick there.
I suppose so. Well, I guess we'll need to continue then.
I'm a Templar.
All right. So the first big topic for the night, and these are both Intel topics, but they're different enough. I think they deserve their own topic apiece.
Yeah.
We've talked before about the Core i9-9900K and what it represents, basically. It's Intel finally acknowledging that 8 cores, 16 threads is the new high end of the mainstream, and that they have to act like it. The specs we've talked about before, but I linked them anyway in the description down below. On the One Tab page, you'll find a link to the Intel ARC page about the Core i9-9900K. But as I said, 8 cores, 16 threads, base clock of 3.6 gigahertz, a maximum turbo frequency of 5 gigahertz, but it is easily overclocked to 5 gigahertz on all the cores. How far you get past that seems to be a bit of Depends on your luck in the silicon lottery.
Yeah, it looks like what voltage wall is is trying to go beyond 5 gigahertz, or sometimes moving from 5.1 to 5.2.
It
But
depends on the sample, but I think most chips can hit 5.2, but they hit a voltage wall between about 1.37 and 1.4 volts
at what speed? At 5.2 or
at
5.1?
5.2. I've seen some people who have gotten golden sample chips be able to overclock it up to 5.3 at about that same 1.35 volts.
Okay.
Um, and some have been able to get 5.4 to finish benchmarking, but it's not stable.
Yeah, but if you're doing that on the original solder tin, you're looking at some very extreme cooling for that.
Oh,
Like
yes.
you're looking at beyond a 240 AIO.
The ones I saw who were able to reach those clock speeds were doing it on 360 rads.
Yeah. Because that thing, when you push it that hard, 8 cores, 14 nanometer, ooh, it's eating some power, man. Especially when you're running those torture tests on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is nominally a 95-watt part, but we know that Intel has been a little bit eh, goofy about how they rate TDP
Mm-hmm.
the last few generations. Anyone who had an 8700K will tell you that was a hot chip, and the 9900K is even hotter.
Yep. Don't buy a space heater. You don't need one. Just overclock your 9900K.
Yeah, Intel is discovering the same lesson that AMD discovered a few years ago with the 9590, that when you take 8 cores and you overclock them to 5 gigahertz, it tends to produce a lot of heat.
Hmm.
Now, admittedly, it's the 9900K is not a 225-watt part like the 9590 was, but as we'll see in some of the testing that's done, it's not that far off either.
No, not well. You're overclocking it, so you are running it out of spec anyway. But I want to say that 95-watt TDP should probably be closer to 120. Is
Yeah,
that? Hmm?
the actuals. I'm looking at the AnonTech review here. Basically, what it looks like is in their overclocking results. Let's see. Or in their power consumption results, sorry. They go into a lot of detail about how Intel measures TDP and what the difference between PL1, PL2, and PL3 are. Those are the various power limits that are built into the chip
Mm-hmm.
and have been ever since Skylake. And so basically, by Intel's own definition, the TDP is an indicator of the cooling performance required for a processor to maintain its base frequency under load. So if you were only able to cool 95 watts worth of heat, your 9900K would be stuck permanently at 3.6 gigahertz.
Well, to be honest, who's going to spend $600 on a processor and cool it with, you know, uh, a 120-watt tower cooler that you can get online for $20 to $30? Like,
Like the Gamax 400 or the Hyper 212 Evo.
right? You're not doing that. Maybe if you're an i5 shopper, but not if you're a 9900K shopper, dude. I
Right.
mean, you're getting a 240-watt AIO at the very least, or an NHD 15 kind of thing.
So, the reason I linked the non-tech review is because they did do some extensive power consumption testing, and what they found was very interesting.
Sure.
Maximum CPU power draw for the 9700K, which remember does not have hyperthreading enabled and is only 8 cores, 8 threads. Under full load, they measured 124.27 watts. For that's a 9700K.
What was that? 124.
124 watts.
Okay.
For the 9900K, they measured 168.48 watts.
That's running stock, no overclocking. Just full load.
Under full load. And that's at stock clocks.
You know what my 2700X runs when you run it at stock settings under full load? 120-ish watts, somewhere around there. 120 to 125.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And it's, when you're torturing it, it's running between 3.9 and 4 to 4, maybe 4.1. So, but that's on a very cheap, X470 board and a 360 AIO. So,
But yeah, they also look specifically at how power draw ramps up as you add more threads.
Okay.
And as they did, power draw was an almost linear curve. It started at 8 watts for idle power with 0 threads loaded. It jumps up to 36, but from there it's almost linear as you load up threads up to 166 watts.
That's good. At least it's a reproducible type of thing. At least it's a predictable result.
Yeah, it is almost linear. Of course, they're testing on MSI's MPG Z390 Gaming Edge AC, which is only one step down from their MEG Creation Godlike,
which I want to say is a $300 or $400 motherboard.
Right.
So that's about $900 right there on the low end. Probably realistically closer to 1,000 for 2 parts. That's crazy for the amount of performance you get at stock settings.
Yeah. And so,
yeah, so you really need a 240 watt. You need, I think, to run that stock to dissipate 166 watts of heat. Whenever you're building a system, you want to think of worst possible scenario. So I would think at the very least you want a 240 watt AIO for that. Because 120 watt AIO is going to be roughly equivalent to an NHD 15 or maybe slightly worse. So yeah, you'd need at least a 240 watt or 240 mil AIO for that.
Yeah, and at that point, you're not really leaving yourself much overclocking headroom, as Anantech found out. In their review, when they went to overclock the 9700K, they were able to get up to 5.3 gigahertz stable at 1.325 volts, which is a fairly impressive result. Getting 5.3 gigahertz on an 8-core part, even if it is only 8 threads, at 1.325 volts is fairly impressive.
Well, and that's a non-hyper-threaded or non-SMT chip. So,
right.
Yeah. That's impressive, though.
Whereas with the 9900K, they did not fare as well. they were able to overclock the turbo setting, the 4.7 gigahertz all-core turbo.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to modify the power options there to where they were able to reduce power consumption at the all-core turbo by about 41 watts.
What?
So
That's pretty significant.
yeah, almost 25% of total power, they said, and reduced temperatures by 24 degrees Celsius. And starting from that, they were able to increase the all-core turbo up to 5.0 gigahertz, but not any past that.
Wow.
So apparently their 9700K was a really good sample, and their 9900K, it would seem, was not a very good sample. At least taken from what they're showing here in their overclocking numbers. But they say at 5 gigahertz, at 1.25 volts, which is decent, but not anything amazing. That's pretty much within spec.
Mm-hmm.
They were hitting 87 degrees Celsius.
Jeez. Crazy. Of course, they're pushing it, so.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of cooling are they running on the test?
For this particular test, let's see. Oh, they don't have it on this page. I have to go back to the test setup. Their test bed setup for cooling. Let's see. They were using the they call it the True Copper, which is apparently a They don't have a link here to. It is apparently an air cooler.
That's impressive. They are brave. They are indeed brave.
Okay, so that the True Copper is a all copper CPU cooler from Thermalright.
Ah, okay.
So unrelated blast from the past, but it's been a long time since I've seen them. Apparently, it's being sold from X-Oxide. X-Oxide, that was a site I used to use way back in the early 2000s when I was looking for high-end computer parts.
Nice. Glad to see they're still around.
Apparently, the Thermalright True Copper is available from X-Oxide for $100, $99.99.
Well,
but it is a full copper heatsink.
That and it's not too far off from pricing for an NHD 15.
That's true.
So now I don't know if they compete. It kind of sounds like they do, but I'm not really sure.
Well, yeah, Thermalright, Silverstone, Noctua, all kind of compete in that high-end air cooler space. So, moving on from a non-text review, which is an excellent breakdown of the chip, its design, and all the performance benchmarks that they did. Probably one of the better video reviews I've seen was from Steve at Hardware Unboxed. He also does the reviews for TechSpot. He's Australian, but just the amount of benchmarking he was able to do in the very limited amount of time he had the chip.
You make it sound like he's got a disability. Oh, he's Australian.
Well, I didn't mean it that way. I was just making mention of the fact that he's not a U.S.-based reviewer.
Right. I'm sorry. It was just funny. I know.
But he did a fairly large number of benchmarks given the fact that he didn't have that long with the chip.
He does good stuff usually.
And his analysis mirrored a lot of what I saw from many of the tech YouTubers, which was basically, yes, it is most definitely the fastest gaming chip on the planet right now, but it makes absolutely no sense for the average gamer.
Yeah. Or streamer.
And it almost doesn't make sense for even your high-end content creators, because at that point you're going to want more than 16 PCIe lanes. You're going to want more than dual channel RAM.
Mm-hmm. And potentially more than 16 threads.
Yeah, it's the 9900K. Again, to refer back to a non-text review, they call it the CPU for the gamer who wants it all and has the money to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it in almost every scenario they tested it in, and Steve came to the same conclusion. It is the best processor, or is within best processor range in every test.
Mm-hmm. And
But
I really don't think anyone's really contesting that at all. I think
right,
that's been the general understanding that it
and
would
that's
be.
what made Intel's contention about all this so weird. Was no one was arguing that it wasn't going to be the best at gaming,
Right.
but given its price point and given its competition, it doesn't make that much sense. You know, if you need 8 cores, 8 threads on a mainstream chipset, well, you can go buy the Ryzen 7 2700 for around $280.
Is it? Are you thinking the 2700X? I was
I
thinking it was
think
cheaper than that.
I think the 2700X is closer to 300 right now, but
Yeah, it's slightly over 300 actually. Like 305 or 310, somewhere in there.
yeah, it's the Ryzen 7 2700X is 310. 2700s actually went down in price. It is 269 right now on Newegg. So $270. If you double that, it's about $540, which is roughly what the 9900K is going for.
Or
I hear another voice.
Glad to have you back with us, Hunter.
I'm back from being sick momentarily.
Are you okay?
Yeah. I had a coughing fit that would not leave me alone.
Oh.
And the coughing fit turned into something worse.
Oh.
I see.
Thanks for
muting. And the coughing... Welcome. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
You were missed.
Indeed. So we were discussing the 9900K and specifically how pretty much all the reviewers, all the independent reviews, backed up Intel's original assertion that it was the best gaming processor out there. But then they threw in the little bit of reality that it's currently priced at $540.
Hey, if people have the money, go do it.
Right. Whereas if you need 8 core 16 threads, but you don't have that kind of money to spend, the Ryzen 7 2700X at $310 exists.
Yeah.
Yep.
But of course, for the Intel enthusiasts, the Intel fans, I mean, can't you just live off of an old i7? Do you have to get the latest and greatest? It's always, they always say the i7, of course, this is not the i7, but I mean, the latest i7 is the best for gaming. It's like, that's fine and everything, but the previous generations are perfectly fine, in my opinion.
Yeah, but
People are still
honestly,
running on an i7-2600K.
Yeah, that's what my backup PC is using.
if you sat a 2600X next to a 9900K, both at stock settings, and you played games, I doubt you see a difference. I doubt you feel a difference. You know,
You probably
or a
wouldn't feel a difference, but
2700X.
when you look at the benchmarks, you'd see the difference. But I don't think 80 FPS feels any different than 180 FPS
Unless
on
you're
Ultra.
a super high refresh rate monitor,
Yeah.
at which point, if you're shooting for 120 hertz, 144 hertz, high refresh gaming, you're probably not going to be looking at the budget into the market to begin with.
Yeah.
No.
You're looking at least solidly in the mid range and in the higher tier or the lower tiers of the high end.
Well, I mean, people can always go for that $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 monitor to match with their i9-9900 Gold Edition Ultra Bazinga 3000 level God Killer CPU.
Bedazzled.
Bedazzle, yep. And then something will come out. Intel will come out with something that's better than the i9-9900K, and people will be like, "Well, I got to drop this stupid CPU and get the latest and greatest," because I always have to have the latest and greatest.
Yeah.
Then eventually, their comparable CPU, build is going to cost them as much as a brand new car.
And maybe it's just me talking as someone who limped along on a Phenom 2 X6 for 7 years. Well, technically 5 years, because I had a 2600K system for a couple of years there, but it was not my main system. But I've always been the type of person who I use my hardware until I absolutely have to upgrade it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to stop enthusiasts who want the latest and greatest as soon as it comes out, because there are those people who like the people who did a quad SLI setup, not because they needed to, but just because they had the money to spend. Which, in my opinion, is, well, people can do whatever they want with their money. But I'm running a 5-year-old CPU, and of course it is bottlenecked by my 1070 is bottlenecked by the 8320 FX. I know that because I'm not getting as many frames as I should be. That's just because I haven't gone up to the full new build of a Ryzen setup. I have to dump my CPU, my RAM, and my motherboard just to get with better FPS.
Right.
To be comparable to my 1070.
That's the only downside upgrading from a DDR3 platform to a DDR4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why I haven't done it yet. And I've been waiting on sales.
Right. Yeah, DDR4 RAM is the killer right now.
Yep.
The CPUs, you can get them fairly cheap. The motherboards, again, you can catch them on sale and get exactly what you want for a pretty good deal.
Really, if I want to do 2 sticks of 4 gigs, if I had a 4-DIMM motherboard, I can get away with doing 2 sticks of 4 gigs to make 8 gigs for a minimum for DDR4 for under $100. And then later on, get another two set of 4 gigs to make 16 gigs. And that's as much as I have right now, is 16 gigs in 2 sticks. But if I want to pay $200, I'd get 2 sticks of 8 gigs right now.
Yeah,
which I don't want to.
That's the problem. Is memory is way more expensive than it was in 2016. For reference, I recently purchased 2 4-gig sticks of DDR4. They were used, and I felt like I got a good deal off eBay when I got them for $61. For reference, in 2016, I purchased 16 gigs of DDR4 at the same speed, admittedly from a different company, for $65.
Yeah.
That's how much the RAM spike has hurt the prices.
Yeah, I bought a bunch of RAM over the summer, and 16 gigs of 3200 was going for around 200.
Yeah.
Yep.
Looks like now it's dropped down to about 135 though.
Still a little bit much,
It is.
in my opinion.
When your RAM costs almost as much as your CPU, when you're looking at a Ryzen 5 build,
Yeah.
And there's not that many. I know that ballistics. I forgot the main name of it.
Crucial.
Might be Crucial. Yeah, Crucial
series.
Ballistics 2400 megahertz or 2666 megahertz can overclock to 3000 or 3200 in the BIOS, but there's not that many other under 3000 RAM that can overclock to what you need for Infinity Fabric if you want to go for that in a Ryzen build.
Yeah.
Yeah, G-Scale's Flare X, I think, is one of the few sets that have been proven to do it well.
That's because they built it for it. Because
Mm-hmm.
they sent those RAM sticks specifically out to all the tech reviewers, tech YouTubers, to try out the Ryzen CPU.
Yep, because it used the Samsung B-Die memory.
Yeah.
Ripjaws is also good. Trident Z is also good.
Yeah.
A lot of the G-Skill stuff's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm running G-Skill DDR3 1866 RAM in my current main build, and G-Skill has always been good bang for buck and cheaper than like Corsair and the flashier ones. Good value, and I've never had a problem with it. I had bothered overclocking the RAM, but that's just because I didn't have a need to.
Yeah, I had some Ripjaws for DDR3 that was rated for 2400. That was some really solid RAM that I used with my 2600K for a while.
Was that 2400 on an XMP profile?
It was.
Oh my gosh, man, that's crazy. That's absolute insanity, man.
I trade that deal was one where I traded for. I'm trying to remember. I traded that RAM for. I want to say it was an SSD in another part at the time, but I really got the better end of that particular deal. I've used that RAM in a number of situations. Because it was DDR3, I was able to use it with one of my AMD APUs to really give a boost to the integrated graphics on that APU. It was an i9-9900K, and I got performance on that comparable to. Uh-oh.
Sorry.
That's all right. I got performance on it comparable to roughly a 7670.
That's impressive.
So, anyway, we've gotten a little bit off topic, but we do have another topic I wanted to discuss this evening, another big topic. And it's one that got a lot of attention earlier this week from a report from the site, rather appropriately titled Semi-Accurate. And it was a report from one of their analysts that said that they had inside information from Intel that they were killing off their 10 nanometer process.
Oh, yeah.
For those who aren't aware, Intel has been attempting to move 10 nanometer node since 2015. Originally after Broadwell, it was supposed to be the move from 14 nanometer Broadwell to Skylake at 14 nanometer, and then Kaby Lake was originally supposed to be 14 nanometer plus, with Cannon Lake / Coffee Lake being a 10 nanometer part. Only it didn't quite turn out that way. As we know, Intel went from having a process architecture organization, I got a little ahead of myself. They were originally doing, back in the 2000s and early 2010s, the TikTok architecture, where they would do a new architecture on a known process node, and then they would move that architecture to a smaller process.
Mm-hmm.
And the TikTok process worked well all the way up till Haswell or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then TikTok became Process Architecture Optimization, or PAO. And the first step in the PAO process was with Broadwell. It's where they moved from 22 nanometer to 14 nanometer. The architecture was a switch from Broadwell to Skylake, and then Kaby Lake was supposed to be the optimization of Skylake. And then at the time it was being called Cannon Lake. Cannon Lake was supposed to be 10 nanometer. Only we didn't wind up with Cannon Lake. We got Coffee Lake as a fourth 14 nanometer iteration. And we got another with the Coffee Lake refresh with the 9th generation. So for those counting at home, the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th generations of Intel processors all were on the 14 nanometer process node. That's unprecedented for Intel. So the fact that they've not been able to move forward onto the 10 nanometer process has been a bit of an embarrassment for the company.
Well, yeah, I'd have to agree, because they've been working on it for a long time. And their competition is moving beyond the 10 nanometer to 7. So their competition has caught up and is starting to surpass them. So for a company that's usually been on the forefront of process leadership, they're behind the game.
Indeed. Of course, Intel is claiming that their 10 nanometer process is actually better spaced, or is than 7 nanometers from TSMC. But again, once again, 10 nanometer, they've been stuck on that, moving to that process node for almost 4 years now.
Well, they're probably right that some aspects of their 10 nanometer is probably superior to the TSMC 7 nanometer. But yeah, you're also right in the fact that they've been stuck on that for 4 years now. That's the problem. Not whether one's more superior than the other one. The problem is they've been stuck on that for 4 years, and it's making them. It's having an impact. I mean, when you look at the overclocking behavior of i9-9900K, it's really not that much better than the overclocking behavior of the 8700K. You could say that they're probably at a point where they can't really improve much more. Maybe they can, but it's almost looking like their 14 nanometer process is, at the end of what it can potentially do.
Of course,
So,
given this report, in a very unusual move for them, Intel moved almost immediately to deny it. Through their Intel News official handle on Twitter, they released this statement. Media reports published today that Intel is ending work on the 10 nanometer process are untrue. We are making good progress on 10 nanometer. Yields are improving consistent with the timeline we shared during our last earnings report. Of course, well, the truth of the matter is this is what Intel has been saying since 2015. There's a response. I'm going to share my screen here for just a second because there is... Let's share that and present to everyone. So this is the tweet from Intel, and the very first response is, like you guys were on track for 2015, 2016, 2017, and 2018. And they point out that originally Intel had intended for 22 nanometer to debut in 2011. It didn't debut till 2012 with Ivy Bridge. And that 14 nanometer was originally supposed to debut in 2013. It didn't debut until 2015 with Broadwell. And have basically all the rest of the process nodes are anywhere from 3 to 5 years behind, or excuse me, 3 to 4 years behind where they were originally supposed to be.
So, that is really funny.
That is very funny, actually.
So yes, they're all things tech there, kind of poking fun at them. Ars Technica did a good summary article about everything that went on, and so there's been a lot of discussion this week in the tech community about whether or not Intel is planning to cut their own 10 nanometer process. Intel claims they aren't, that they're making good progress. But the question that keeps getting asked, and that I keep hearing over and over, is that Intel just trying to protect itself for trying to please its investors? And the statement to Semi-Accurate was the actual truth about the matter from, maybe an executive at Intel? Or is Intel really on track for 10 nanometer? Now, technically, Intel has produced a 10 nanometer CPU already. It was launched as part of their Cannon Lake series, but it was branded as an 8th gen part in the mobile space. The Core i3-8121U. I've included a link again down below in the description to all of our articles, which also has a link to the Intel ARC page that details the i3-8121U. It is technically made on the 10 nanometer lithography. It is a dual core mobile part that is hyper-threaded, so 2 cores, 4 threads, and it is designed for thin and light applications. It has a base clock of 2.2 gigahertz, a max turbo of 3.2 gigahertz, and 4 megabytes of cache, and a TDP of 15 watts. So this is mostly designed for thin and light notebooks.
Mhm.
Oddly, I went to go look and see what products were available with the i3-8121U. There were only two that came up. The first was a Lenovo IdeaPad, a 15-inch laptop that featured this CPU combined with a Radeon 540 GPU, a discrete GPU. Now that was interesting to me because if you look at the specifications for the 8121U, it does not have integrated graphics, which is odd in Intel's mobile lineup. Almost like they had to axe the graphics in order to achieve 15-watt TDP with this process.
Well, it's probably also an attempt to iron out any bugs with the process. So if they're able to make a processor on the node or on the at that level for manufacturing, it's probably pretty close. Or at least I would think that. But like I said, this should give them a chance to iron out any bugs that they do find or do have. So hopefully they can. Hopefully 2019 is the year when they can come out with 10 nanometer. It'd be nice to see.
Indeed, it would. And there is some hope for them. Immediately following the announcement on the 22nd from Semi-Accurate, Hot Hardware published an article where they said that there was a CPU benchmark leak in the Geekbench database for an alleged Ice Lake processor on the 10 nanometer node.
Ice Lake. Is that the 10th?
So yes, Ice Lake is supposed to be the one following Cannon Lake.
Gotcha.
And so this alleged Ice Lake processor is a 2-core, 4-thread processor. And this was tested, by the way, on Ubuntu 18.04 LTS. So this is Geekbench for Linux. The information that was picked up by Geekbench 4.3.0 was that it was Intel Ice Lake client platform, Intel Ice Lake U DDR4 SODIMMs. So this is apparently a laptop processor that uses SODIMMs. And it was only identified by the name as Genuine Intel Family 6 Model 126 Stepping 1. Which basically means Family 6 means that it is a 64-bit processor. It is Model 126 and Stepping 1. So this is an initial engineering sample, essentially. The Stepping 1 tells us that much.
Gotcha.
Apparently, it has a base frequency of 2.6 gigahertz with 4 megabytes of L3 cache, which sounds eerily similar, though slightly faster than the 8121U, which again is on the same process node, but is only 2.2 gigahertz. The processor that this is supposedly this engineering sample achieved a single-core score in Geekbench of 4,151 and a multi-core score of 7,945. So, obviously, anytime you see benchmark leaks like this, you have to take them with a grain of salt. And the timing is a little bit suspicious, given that we had the Semi-Accurate report followed by Intel's unusual and very quick denial and then suddenly there's a leak for a 10 nanometer processor into the Geekbench database. The timing is a little odd. I agree, but I don't know. If these are the type of numbers it's achieving in Geekbench, that's not bad for a 15-watt TDP part. I was going to say, if we were going to look at a comparable Kaby Lake refresh processor, we took a look at, say, the i3-8130U.
Yep.
So the i3-8130U is a very similar performing processor. It is on the 14 nanometer node. It is also a 15-watt TDP part. It has a base frequency of 2.2 gigahertz and a max turbo frequency of 3.4 gigahertz. Its single core score in Geekbench is 3,693, and its multi-core score is 7,146. So this alleged Ice Lake benchmark score is a significant step up, assuming it is correct.
Well, it's probably mostly clock speed. I mean, I'm sure they've got some architectural optimizations in there, but I'm assuming that on the superior node, it's probably clock speed.
Right. I mean, it is running 400 megahertz faster at base.
Yeah. Which means it'll boost a lot higher. And, you know, well, I don't know how the power profiles work on a dual core. I don't know, especially being that it's in a mobile platform. I don't know how that would work. Because I imagine it, well, performing like it does, if it's under load, it probably gets right back up to base clock and then, you know, does its business and then goes right back down into a much lower clock speed. So I don't know. I'd have to think about that for a bit and look at some results online.
For reference, if anyone's curious, a Geekbench single core score of 4151 puts it right in line with the Core i5 7360U or the desktop Core i5 7600T, which is a low power variant of the i5 7600. So take that as you will. Admittedly, though, the 7600T, admittedly, I believe was either a 35 or a 45 watt part. So, I skipped over a story. I'm so sorry. There was one last thing about the 9900K. We'll touch it real quick. This is from Kit Guru. Apparently, Der Bauer was able to overclock the 9900K to 7.6 gigahertz on all cores using liquid.
Wow.
The speed didn't really come out over audio very well. There's a lot of background noise.
Yeah.
7.6 gigahertz on liquid helium.
Liquid helium?
7.6 on liquid helium for all cores?
For all cores.
That's crazy. That's quite crazy.
Yes, it is. But it's Der Bauer working his magic. So
right.
That's pretty awesome.
It's awesome, but it's like, who can do that other than him?
Yeah, definitely not a score you're going to see on any kind of traditional cooling setup.
Yeah. Even a custom liquid cooling setup.
Yeah.
I wonder what it'd be on a custom liquid cooling setup.
5.3, 5.4.
Yeah, but if you get lucky on the silicon lottery, 5.3 to 5.4. If you don't, probably around 5.2.
Or
On
if you
a
can go to siliconlottery.com and pay twice as much as the CPU costs, then you can get a bin GPU
Oh yeah, sign me
or a
up.
bin
1,300
CPU.
bucks for the processor, please.
Yeah.
oh yes,
Yeah.
I would
20,000
like to
something.
spend. I'd like to spend $1,000 900K, please.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get
For a
guaranteed
non-thread
bin
reverse class.
GPU.
Yeah. Sign me up, please.
Speaking
Let me pay 2014 8-core 16-thread prices
right,
in 2018.
Let's see.
speaking of CPU prices, though, we'll wrap up here. We do have one hardware, and really, how much of a deal it is really depends on where you are, at least here in the States.
Yeah.
Because Newegg has the Ryzen 5 2600X. It's at its normal price of 200. Well, they're selling it for $219.99, but they're offering a promo code EMCEPRS55 through Monday, October the 29th, 2018. That saves you an extra $15 on the market. So cool. I'm getting a CPU for $200.
It's not bad.
You're coming in and your audio's coming in and out.
Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, so getting a Ryzen 5 2600X for $200, that's great, right?
You also have to pay attention to how much Newegg is charging for tax
Right.
now.
Being that I'm in Tennessee, one of the states where Newegg has one of their warehouses, they have one in Memphis, I have to pay tax. My tax on my purchase came out to around $20.
Hey.
So, Ryzen 5 2600X, even after my $15 savings, actually winds up costing me about $225.
Yeah, that's about the same with me. It was like, yeah, it was 221 because it was $16.40 tax for Alabama.
That's why I don't mind just driving to Micro Center.
Yeah,
Well,
I would like to do that.
anyway, right?
You know, it's only 3 hours away.
Oh, that's
I
not
mean,
bad.
No,
Make
it's
a
not.
day. Make it a
I
day.
mean, my closest Micro Center is just 700 miles away. It's not like it's that big a deal.
Oh, that's a hop, skip, and a jump.
Yeah, and if you're getting a motherboard with it, you save $30.
Yep. And it's already priced lower anyway.
Yeah.
But if you don't find that a particular deal, you can get the non-X variant, the Ryzen 5 2600, for just $159.99 plus 99 cents shipping
That's crazy.
from Newegg.
Yeah. And then you can overclock it to the X speed, stock speed. Even on the stock cooler, it does a little bit of overclocking.
Yeah, you get the Wraith Stealth Cooler 2600 instead of the Wraith Spire like you do with the X. But even the Wraith Stealth is good for some modest overclocking.
Yeah.
And by modest, I mean maybe 100 megahertz bump.
Or if you want to just buy the Wraith Max, it's only $50.
Well,
I think it's overpriced personally.
Yeah, it is.
but admittedly, given the price difference between the 2600 and the 2600X, you have that much extra money to buy a pretty good CPU cooler for.
Oh
That's
yeah,
true.
especially with the 120 millimeter liquid coolers are pretty cheap.
Yeah, I actually got a good deal on a Cooler Master Liquid Light money the other day.
That's not a bad cooler either. That's a decent cooler.
I got that for $30 plus $5 shipping.
Is that with the Silencio fan?
I think so, because it was the 20.
Yeah, I think that has the silent Silencio fan, which is a nice looking cool fan.
Yeah, I'm going to be testing it here in the not too distant future. Unfortunately, my Ryzen 7 1800X system that I call Crimson Phoenix, it's been having some odd issues of late, and so I'm going to have to strip it down and see what's going on. So I'm going to have to build back up my old 2600K system, get it back working, because I stripped it for parts for other projects. But get it back up and running, so I can have something to work with.
Well, hopefully you narrow down the issue.
Yep. I think the most likely culprits for the issues I've been running into at this point is probably either, since I have two RX 480s in Crossfire, it's probably either one of the GPUs is getting smothered, or I'm running into a power supply issue. It's one of the two. Because the system runs fine, everything seems to be okay, and then all of a sudden, just boom, instant black. Which sounds like to me either a thermal throttle shut off or it's a power supply issue.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought of it being a power supply issue, but it very well could be.
Which it's an almost brand new Seasonic, or it was a brand new Seasonic 850 watt titanium prime. So it's 90 plus titanium power supply. But I could have got a dud. And like I said, it only happens under very specific circumstances. So
what happens if you benchmark it like a torture test?
I've run it through 3D Mark, like 3 runs in a row to try and simulate a torture test, and it didn't do the blackout issue. I'm thinking about trying to run it through Unigine superposition and see if it does the same thing.
Okay. But yeah, Unigine Heaven I wouldn't suggest because there's too many scene changes.
Right. I think superposition would be a better test for it.
Probably. I'm not familiar with the test though.
Anyway, well, gentlemen, do you have anything else to add? We could sit here all night discussing my computer problems, but
the only thing I have to add is that the SiliconLottery.com, all their CPUs are sold out. The i9-9900K bin CPU is sold out. All of them are sold out, actually.
That doesn't surprise me, given the supply issues with the 9900K.
They've got the i9X series and the i9 consumer level. The i7-9700K is sold out. And the gold one is sold out. So really all of them are sold out. They're either sold out because people bought them, or they're sold out just because they don't have stock. So that's... I was like, oh, sweet, $0. Oh, it's sold out. Darn it. I just wanted to see how much it was going for. Not that I was going to buy one. I don't have that kind of money right now.
Completely
so that's just a
completely understand.
Fun thing. The only thing they have is the delidding kit for $40. which doesn't really matter with the next stuff being soldered.
Well, Gamers Nexus actually did a pretty good video where they showed that Intel went with a very soft solder. And so it's still very possible to delid the 9900K.
Huh.
It's just, it requires significantly more effort than in the past.
Gotcha.
It's still relatively easy to delid, but instead of being a process that takes, 10, 15 minutes like in the past, you're probably going to spend an hour or more trying to delid it. And that's assuming you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean the solder TIM is very hard to get off and clean off. So that's most of it. And then you're after you delid it, you're scraping off the glue from around the side of the IHS. And then in some cases you might want to reapply something to reseal it. So yeah, it's a fairly lengthy process. You want to take your time.
Yeah. Gamers Nexus used Grizzly, not Crownot, their liquid metal TIM. And so that showed a roughly 5 to 10 degrees Celsius decrease over the solder that Intel was using. But again, that was after they had managed to, they actually at one point had to sand down part of the IHS to get all the solder off.
Wow.
So, but, well, gentlemen, I'd like to thank you once again for joining me for this episode of TechForge. Hunter, I'm sorry you got a little bit sick there in the middle, but sometimes stuff happens.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'd like to thank all of you who have been so kind as to watch us this evening, or whenever you happen to be watching us. You can always find us here every week. We generally launch our videos on Friday mornings at 8 a.m. Central Time. So you can check them out then, or anytime at the CrossForge YouTube channel. You can also find all kinds of other great content here on the YouTube channel, or you can see us over on Twitch 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday, and find lots of great content there. We have a wonderful community you can interact with over on our Discord server, as well as our Facebook community. And as always, I've been Dynamo Ned. This has been TechForge. And remember, when life has you down, Jesus loves you, and forge on.
Yep.
Yep.